Picture a crew of ancient mariners lounging on wooden rafts, letting the wind decide if they'll stumble upon new lands or become dinner for some over-enthusiastic fish. It's a dreamy scene. Sun-kissed sailors with hair tousled by Poseidon's sneeze, trusting their fate to wherever the breeze blows. Sure, drifting with the wind sounds poetic, if your goal is to win the title of the world's most sunburnt castaway. But reality? It had other plans. Contrary to legend, ancient sailors weren't just flailing about in a maritime game of pin the tail on the donkey. Mediterranean navigators, crafty Phoenicians, and brilliant Polynesians honed serious skills to pilot their vessels. They read the stars, decoded shifting skies, tracked sea swells, and even took cues from migrating birds, basically nature's original GPS. Egyptians and Greeks powered their journeys with a combo of sail and muscle, because nothing says fitness goals like rowing your way across the Aegean. Polynesians, meanwhile, slipped across oceans in sleek double-hulled canoes, with sails so sharp they could hit tiny target islands as if guided by satellite. With gadgets like the Kamal, lead lines, and those legendary sunstones, their voyages were less blind gamble and more grandmaster chess match against the sea. So next time you picture ancient sailors as hapless sea spuds, remember, without their know-how, the Mediterranean wouldn't be a storied crossroads of civilizations. It'd be one giant bumper boat pool. While some thought ancient sailors were at the mercy of the wind, others believed celestial bodies like the moon offered no help in navigation. Picture early sailors squinting up at the giant glowing cheese wheel and muttering, "Well, that's not exactly helpful." Legend says ancient mariners used the moon's silvery glow as a supernatural GPS, beaming down directions. Reality check. Relying on the moon as a compass is like using a disco ball for street signs. Fancy, but utterly baffling. Here's the scoop. Real ocean navigation leaned on the steady reliability of the sun and stars. The moon? Not so much. Its nightly position is about as dependable as a toddler's promise to behave. Phases and rise times shift like a moody house cat one night ruling the sky. The next vanish during prime steering hours. If early explorers tried moon-by-moon navigation, they'd aim for India and end up fishing in their neighbor's pond. Sure, later sailors used lunar distance to figure out longitude, but only if they secretly enjoyed seasick math and mental gymnastics. Until the 18th century, the moon's biggest contribution to navigation was lighting up sea monster sightings, not giving directions. Sailors stared at the moon, but follow it blindly, and you'd end up lost, dazzled, and maybe howling back. Despite doubts about the moon's usefulness, many assumed sailors never dared to venture far from shore. Imagine a world where a Sunday stroll wasn't a leisurely park jaunt, but a nervous paddle just close enough to spy on your stubborn goat, because the medieval coast was less "here be dragons" and more high-traffic thoroughfare. Legend has it that medieval folk viewed the ocean as a frothing cauldron teeming with fanged nightmares, clinging to the shore like a pigeon glued to a Parisian bakery window. In reality, the average medieval fisherman or trader was surprisingly well-traveled, hugging coastlines and braving open waters long before GPS or podcasts made it a breeze. Northern sailors? They bounced from Norway to Iceland and settled in Greenland long before Columbus was even picking out his hat. The Hanseatic League? Think medieval FedEx, shipping cargo all over the North and Baltic Seas. Meanwhile, Venetians and Genoese treated the Mediterranean like their personal racetrack, dodging rival ships rather than mythical krakens. Sure, some sailors stuck close to shore, mostly because medieval boats leaked worse than political promises, but adventure outweighed sea monster jitters. Otherwise, we'd all be dining on a lot less cod. This limited range was often attributed to the absence of tools like the compass, making direction finding impossible. Ever tried navigating without Google Maps or even a basic compass? Welcome to the era before magnetic north had any meaning. When turn left at the Haunted Willow was cutting-edge cartography. People often picture ancient travelers as clueless wanderers, bumping into rocks and accidentally stumbling upon entire continents. In reality, they were less lost zombies and more celestial detectives. Forget Siri. By day, they used the sun, and by night, the North Star, Polaris, the universe's original GPS for the Northern Hemisphere. The Phoenicians and Polynesians were the real MVPs, reading ocean swells and bird flight patterns like seafaring Sherlocks. Europe didn't discover the magnetic compass until the 12th century, but by then, explorers had already crisscrossed the globe armed with nothing but keen observation, ironclad memories, and probably a very stubborn grandma insisting she definitely knew the way. Who needs magnetic north when your biggest navigation challenge is 12 hours of arguing over directions? So next time you curse MapQuest, remember, the original navigation system was just follow that weird-looking tree. Without compasses, some believed sailors relied on maps that were nothing more than fanciful drawings. Ever glanced at an old map and thought, did pirates sketch this during happy hour? You're not alone. We've all wondered if take a left at the Kraken was ever bona fide navigation advice. The classic myth paints early cartographers less as map makers and more as fantasy novelists, doodling dragons where real land ran out. Sure, medieval mapmakers sprinkled sea serpents and suspiciously cheerful lions into the unknown, but their quills weren't just fueled by mead and wild guesses. Way back in the 2nd century CE, Ptolemy brought some order to the madness, introducing coordinates and a math-based system to chart the globe, proof that at least one person had a calculator handy. Many medieval and Renaissance maps were far more accurate than they get credit for. After all, merchants and conquerors needed actual ports, not directions to the nearest merman meetup. So next time you lose your keys, resist the urge to doodle a dragon on your kitchen wall. Remember, maps reflect not just what people knew, but what they hoped, or feared, they might discover. As a result, it was thought that they never managed to cross entire oceans. Picture Vikings clinging to the idea that the ocean's edge was a watery cliff. Suddenly, their oceanic bravado looks a bit dodgy. You'd think these horn-helmeted, axe-swinging warriors never dared stray far from their frosty fjords. Popular myth paints Norse ships as glorified canoes, perfect for a lazy river cruise, but ready to fold faster than you can say, "long ship," at the first Atlantic wave. Toss that tale overboard. History sings a stormier tune. Vikings didn't just cross oceans, they made ocean hopping look like a Sunday kayak jaunt. Archaeologists have tracked their footprints in Iceland, Greenland, and, plot twist, North America, centuries before Columbus's GPS had even a signal. Vinland wasn't just bedtime folklore, it was Viking travel blogging from Newfoundland. At Lonso Meadows, Norse leftovers prove their longships had better mileage than your family's rattling 90s van. Masters of celestial navigation, they used the sun, stars, and allegedly some nifty sunstones. Modern cruises boast hot tubs and shuffleboard. Vikings had built-in enemies and accidental scurvy. So did their ancient GPS ever announce, "You have arrived at your unexplored continent"? Nordic Siri remains tight-lipped. Their supposed avoidance of vast seas was linked to the idea that Dead Reckoning was mere guesswork. Dead Reckoning, the GPS of the Age of Sail, but with more guesswork and fewer satellites. Picture salty sailors staring into endless blue, wondering if land lurks just beyond the next wave or 1,000 miles farther. Spoiler, probably the latter. Navigators of yore relied on Dead Reckoning, a finely honed art of pinpointing your location using speed, direction, and the amount of time you'd miraculously avoided sinking. Think of it as the nautical equivalent of "Are we there yet?" but with more charts, tougher math, and way higher stakes. To track their progress, these brave souls jotted down headings and speeds, turning every voyage into the world's longest and most nerve-wracking math problem. GPS signal loss? Not an issue. Just unexpected whale traffic jams and the occasional hurricane rerouting them to impromptu Caribbean vacations. Precision tools? Forget high-tech gadgets, just toss a log overboard, count your knots, and hope for the best. If you actually made it to your destination, credit either raw skill or the universe's twisted sense of humor. When Dead Reckoning inevitably went off the rails, sailors sometimes stole a glance at the stars, provided clouds or crippling existential dread didn't spoil the show. Every landfall was equal parts miracle and accidental tourism, proving that in the Age of Sail, getting lost wasn't a mishap. It was basically tradition. Moreover, the art of navigation was believed to be a male-only skill. Close your eyes and picture a salty old sailor. Odds are, he's got a beard big enough to shelter a family of sparrows and a voice that sounds like gravel in a blender. Hardly someone you'd expect humming Britney Spears at the helm. Now, the myth goes that men were the sole captains of wave-tossed vessels through history. while women stayed home knitting sweaters for yetis or whatever else remained stubbornly landlocked. But hold the anchor, because reality throws that myth overboard. Women were climbing the rigging, plotting courses, and battling seasickness long before sailors had the luxury of blaming the GPS. Ancient Egyptians had women steering Nile boats. Viking longships boasted shield maidens as fierce as their braids were unwieldy. And Ming Dynasty treasure fleets included maritime women, though apparently navigatrix didn't make it onto the ancient job listings. Pirate queens like Anne Bonny and Qing Shi weren't just polishing doubloons, they captained ships and gave admirals nightmares. Many adventurous women pulled off Oscar-worthy performances, masquerading as men to join the crew. Call it 17th century method acting. The old "women are bad luck on ships" rule? More like a half-baked HR memo from 1693. Fast forward to today, and female captains are still smashing nautical glass ceilings, sometimes literally, but mostly figuratively. Navigating by the stars was often seen as an almost impossible rocket science-level skill. Imagine sailing across the open ocean with nothing but twinkling stars above. No trusty recalculating voice nagging you every time you took a creative detour. If you think celestial navigation belongs only to scholarly, bearded wizards clutching brass sextants and muttering ancient incantations. Plot twist! In reality, everyone from salty merchants to swashbuckling pirates depended on the night sky. Squinting at the heavens was way more reliable than squinting at that notoriously inaccurate treasure map. Their toolkit? A sextant. Think, the cooler, nautical cousin of a protractor. A chronometer, shout out to John Harrison, the ultimate clockmaker turned TikTok legend, and a mix of math plus a dash of hopeful, wishful thinking. Finding your latitude? Easy, just eyeball the North Star. Longitude? That's where the headaches and many a lost weekend began. But these ancient star readings weren't about romance. They were about not becoming an unfortunate reef statistic. Even today, navies drill it into recruits, just in case satellites decide to take a coffee break. Sailors truly reached for the stars, and on a good day, managed to miss the sandbars. This perception made shipwrecks seem like inevitable disasters without hope. When people hear shipwreck, they picture certain doom. Cue the violins and that classic sinking scene. Thanks a lot, Titanic. The popular myth insists every shipwreck equals instant tragedy and a one-way ticket to the great blue beyond. Pop culture's painted shipwrecks as nothing but watery hellscapes with a generous side of epic despair. Seriously, who invited all the melodrama? But reality loves to throw us a lifeline, sometimes quite literally. History shows plenty of castaways who survived shipwrecks and even thrived. Improvised rafts, floating debris, and the occasional conveniently placed desert island have saved countless souls. Just ask the real-life Robinson Crusoes, who turned castaway status into surprise adventure, complete with accidental suntans and best-selling memoirs, not just watery graves. In fact, some castaways struck gold, literally founding new fortunes or colonies. So next time disaster hits, remember, sometimes the worst casualty is running out of sunscreen, not hope. Now, who's ready to trade chaos for complimentary coconuts and impromptu island living? Many assumed sailors relied solely on what they could see to find their way. Can you imagine sailing the high seas by squinting at distant clouds and crossing your fingers? If so, congratulations. You'd be hopelessly lost somewhere between mildly damp and statistically doomed. The myth says ancient sailors were basically hyper-alert lifeguards with eagle eyes and maybe a hilariously long stick to poke at things in the fog. Picture brave explorers yelling, "Land ho!" every time a sleepy seagull drifted by, as if spotting a bird was the same as discovering a whole continent. If navigation really boiled down to birdwatching on steroids, Columbus would have needed binoculars bigger than Rhode Island. But here's the real deal. Ancient mariners came loaded with serious navigational skills. They tracked the stars, chased the sun, caught the winds, read ocean swells, and mastered instruments like the astrolabe and kamal. Polynesians could decode subtle wave patterns and bird flights to pinpoint tiny islands across thousands of miles. Vikings, more than just burly blondes, used sun compasses and possibly mystical sunstones to find hidden horizons. Meanwhile, Mediterranean sailors crafted surprisingly accurate portolan charts instead of just doodling coastlines in the sand. In short, eyeballs helped, sure, but ancient GPS was all about cosmic creativity. If my navigation depended only on squinting and seagulls, I'd still be circling the block. This reliance on sight was challenged by the notion that the stars were confusing and unpredictable. Imagine the night sky as the original reality TV, packed with drama, plot twists, and more glaring plot holes than your favorite soap opera. Ancient stargazers, bless their stubborn souls, spent countless nights squinting upward, desperately trying to impose order on the sparkling chaos above. But stars, at least from Earth's viewpoint, love to keep the drama alive, shuffling their positions just enough to spark mass confusion. Early civilizations looked up, scratched their bearded chins, and decided these twinkling divas must be gods, cosmic campfires, or at the very least, the universe's first graffiti artists. Constellations? Let's just say agreement wasn't in their vocabulary. While one culture saw a mighty hunter, another spotted a random triangle. Meanwhile, the southern hemisphere was the ultimate understudy, always in the wings, rarely getting the spotlight. Stars sometimes wandered off script, thanks to the planets, or pulled dramatic vanishing acts. Supernovas, the ultimate drama queens. Calendars and sky charts collided, ensuring someone's royal birthday was always fashionably late by at least a month. No wonder mythmakers ran wild. Orion chasing the Pleiades like a cosmic soap opera, scorpions tattling on hunters, and celestial slapstick mishaps galore. Only after eons of stargazing did humans realize those predictable stars were more like rebellious cats, and it was Earth's tipsy wobble throwing off the whole dance routine. Skeptics also claimed that no culture engaged in seaborne trade before modern times. Imagine a world where every boat ride was just a scenic detour. No business, no bargains, just lonely sailors and even lonelier coconuts drifting aimlessly. Sounds peaceful? Maybe. Historically accurate? Absolutely not. The popular myth paints pre-modern folks as coastline Klingons, like introverts at a crowded party barely daring to peek beyond the horizon, afraid of falling off the edge of the earth, or worse, running out of snacks. But let's bring the facts ashore. Ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Chinese, and Polynesians were so aquatic, they put Aquaman's extended family to shame. Those ancient traders didn't get the memo about staying in your lane. They embarked on epic voyages centuries before navigation was as simple as poking your phone screen. Forget DoorDash. If you wanted pepper in ancient Rome, you simply had to wait a few months for the Indian Ocean Express. Silk, gold, pottery, and recipes, words, and wild ideas zipped across hemispheres like ancient viral trends. Trade routes like the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean Network weren't just dusty old roads. They were the watery superhighways of human connection. Modern sailors might weep at some ancient ship designs, or just get hopelessly tangled in the rigging. So next time you savor curry in London or spot Chinese porcelain in Nairobi, raise a glass to those ancient mariners for sliding into DMs, which, naturally, stands for disrupting markets. Such beliefs were compounded by the fear that storms at sea always resulted in certain doom. Picture your ancestors huddled beneath a leaky thatch roof, eyeing every bolt of lightning like Zeus himself just unfriended them. Back then, weather didn't just rain on your parade. It could flatten your village or crisp your turnips. No wonder folks thought storm clouds carried angry gods, and one thunderclap was a celestial side-eye, loud and unmissable. If lightning zapped your favorite goat, that wasn't bad luck. That was cosmic payback. Pure and simple. Move over reality TV. Medieval thunderstorms had drama forecasted as ominous, with a chance of immediate divine punishment. Fast forward to now, and storms don't feel quite so apocalyptic. Suddenly, tempest warnings are less cryptic divine threats and more like screen notifications. Lightning used to mean wrath from Olympus. Today, it mostly just means a Wi-Fi blackout and some seriously unflattering selfies. Thanks to reinforced roofs and Doppler radar, hide under the table has been replaced by grab your phone and download the weather app. So, who's laughing now? Zeus or your local meteorologist? Just remember, no amount of science will save your hairstyle if you leave your umbrella behind. Even famed Vikings were thought to suffer from poor navigation and bad luck. You know the stereotype. Vikings, the GPS-challenged marauders of yore, probably got lost on their way to IKEA and stuck with pillaging because home assembly was too hard. Everyone pictures these burly Norsemen as hopelessly lost explorers, bumbling across the high seas, landing in random places because Thor sneezed on the compass. Legend has it they only found Canada after losing a bet during a particularly rowdy, mead-fueled drinking game. But surprise! Vikings were actually ace navigators. They wielded gadgets like sunstones, think prehistoric polarized sunglasses, read the stars like celestial road maps, and knew coastline clues better than Google Earth on a genius streak. Their navigation secrets were passed down in salty, beard-filled sagas, basically the world's first travel blogs. Great scenery, low population would raid again. Sure, luck played a role when wrestling storms, dodging icebergs, or dealing with unexpectedly grumpy locals, but their real-world GPS got them where they needed to be. Not that they never got lost. Greenland's name remains history's slickest real estate ad. But instead of hapless wanderers, Vikings were bold explorers, opening new trade routes and charging ahead. And let's be honest, even with sat-navs, today's Vikings would storm into villages yelling, "Recalculating." Finally, it was assumed that the practice of celestial navigation disappeared entirely with the advent of GPS. Legend has it that the fine art of celestial navigation sank beneath the waves the minute someone shouted, "Hey Siri, where are we?" Stars and sextants were allegedly tossed overboard to make room for shiny touchscreens and satellites. Mythbuster alert! Celestial navigation is not extinct like the dodo, despite what your phone's smug blue dot insists. Here's the twist. Seasoned sailors, daring explorers, and even astronauts still scan the night sky for longitude. Why? Because GPS isn't always the reliable genie we imagine. It throws tantrums when faced with electromagnetic interference or the occasional cyber attack. The U.S. Navy has even revived celestial navigation training. Who knew satellite guidance could be as moody as a cat in a bathtub? Armed with just a sextant, a trusty timepiece, and the stars, plus the ever-present risk of flinging expensive brass instruments overboard, you too could join the ranks of analog hipster navigators. Besides, nothing spices up date night at sea like the thrilling debate. Is that Venus, or just a really flashy sardine trawler?